Welcome everyone, Questini here with the discussion about Ikit Claw and his campaign. Oh, this video is probably going to act as a horde of Zerg, because that's how I would describe Skaven fans in the Total War Warhammer fanbase. But let me be very clear on this. Ikit Claw is a really powerful Legendary Lord. All the Skaven are powerful Legendary Lords, including that piece of trash, Tretch. I mean, Tretch is trash, but he's still Skaven, so as a result of that, he's good. Yeah, it's mind-blowing, but regardless of that particular situation, Ikit Claw does have some very substantial issues in his campaign. Not because of his race, as is the case in the vast majority of cases, but rather because of his campaign starting position and the dynamics at play, of course, also with race. So the race is not as much of an issue directly, but indirectly, coupled with the bad starting position, it does create problems. And that's exactly what I want to talk about here in this particular video. Those kind of problems that do exist in an Ikit Claw campaign. So to understand what Ikit Claw has to offer, he's a really good engineer. He has the Forbidden Workshop with a lot of power behind it, a lot of really good stuff over here, specifically for weapon teams, including things like Poison Wind Mortars, Globadiers, Bombardiers. He has nuclear weapons. Who could ever believe that Ikit Claw is not a really great Legendary Lord? However, there is a major caveat in all of this. Skaven do very poorly at tier 1. They probably have one of the worst tier 1s in the entire game. Now, this is offset by the fact they can get to things like tier 4 and tier 5 very quickly through their building system. Like whenever they take a settlement, they either get it at tier 1 or they spend food to get it at a higher tier. So if you get the tier 5 settlement as Skaven, you unlock a significant level of power. But the problem is that tier 1, between clan rats and things like Skaven slaves, you have a really bad unit roster. Now, Ikit Claw starts with the tier 1 Skaven Blight. Now, Skaven Blight is one of the most formidable defensive locations in the entire game. And not just because Skaven Blight has an incredibly powerful garrison, though it does absolutely have that, but because the terrain around Skaven Blight makes it so that whenever you see someone moving into attack Skaven Blight, they're going to be slowed down by the marsh over here. So you will have time, plenty of time, to do some recruitment, even if you don't have an army here. So losing Skaven Blight is very difficult. But one settlement does not the faction make, and that is the problem. You start that war with Estalia, specifically you start near Tabaro. And the problem is that while Estalia could be good territory, in particular like the actual provinces of Estalia, not the Irana Mountains, the issue is that Mogr starts over here, near this particular settlement, and he also starts a war with Estalia. So what Mogr is going to do, in particular on a high difficulty, so legendary very hard, he's going to wipe out the Estalian army here, take the settlement, put a hearthstone right in the middle of this, and then he's going to raise these two settlements to the ground before moving to Bibali. That's what he will always do on legendary very hard difficulty. Now the problem for you as Ikit Claw is you can go defeat Mogr. But since he's raised the settlements, well, guess what? You're going to have to rebuild them, and while your economy has a good amount of potential, the Skaven economy does need you to build up settlements and spend a lot of resources doing so before there is any particular value to them. And that is kind of the problem. You will waste a lot of resources over here, and your entire campaign progress will be made slower. Now, you could decide to just be a bit sneaky over here and give the Fey Enchantress some territory here in the Irana Mountains that she would give you some money for, and make an agreement with her. And just build up Estalia itself and then worry about everything else. Though, make no mistake, the Fey Enchantress is certainly going to declare war on you. To say that she hates you would be an understatement. She has a minus 100 aversion against you by default, and then she'll have another minus 100 aversion against you because, well, you wipe out Estalia. Minus 200 aversion is not something you can deal with from a diplomatic standpoint. And even if I were to trade this particular territory to her, keep in mind that you have to defeat Mogr, even if I were to trade this territory to her, she is extremely likely to declare war against me later on in this campaign, which is not really an ideal situation to have to deal with during your campaign, because there's quite a few problems with ending up in a war with the Fey Enchantress in a campaign, in particular due to the fact that the Fey Enchantress is also gonna have a good relationship with Orion. So that isn't a great dynamic to deal with at all. See, Alifanar, in Alifanar's campaign, who is surrounded by enemies, the dynamic, sure, you can end up being screwed by the dynamic that you do have in a campaign, but you will at least have the power to deal with everything that comes your way. As Ikit Claw, you just start with tier 1 settlement, you have to build provinces from scratch, you have to defeat one legendary lord from very early on, and you're going to be struggling throughout the early game. And the problem is, as you expand in any direction over here, either against Bretonnia or against Belegar, what's going to end up happening is you're going to encounter more and more foes. Okay, so that is one plan. It doesn't work because you waste a lot of resources, and eventually you'll end up getting screwed over by Bretonnia. You can make it work, don't get me wrong on that, but it isn't really an ideal situation in a lot of ways. I guess the best thing you could do if you're following the Western campaign plot would be to make a deal with Aranessa and go deal with the Fey Enchantress, and maybe in an alliance with Aranessa you don't have to deal with Belegar as much. But keep in mind, all of Athaloran will declare war on you. The Wood Elves despise you. You could make an alliance with Grom, but yeah, Durfu and Orion together with Belegar is a mean fucking fight. It's not that the campaign is hard per se. That's not the issue. It's the campaign is really annoying and limits your potential as a faction in many substantial ways. That is really a problem you end up dealing with when playing Ikit Claw's campaign. And it's never, that particular dynamic is never really going to go away if you stay around here. Now, your alternative to all of this is, okay, you don't fight for Estonia, you don't fight Mogr, though Mogr is likely going to declare war on you in the long term, because he also doesn't like you. No one likes the Skaven, that's the problem. Mogr is likely going to declare war on you, so what do you do then? Well, you can wait for Aranessa, who is certainly going to march on Tylea and take their capital. You can wait for Aranessa to, you can spend the first few turns just sacking, looting settlement, getting some experience, waiting for Aranessa to march on Tylea's capital. When she does so, you pounce, you wipe her out, you wipe out Tylea, you take Sartosa. The problem with that is you suddenly have a border with Belegar, and let me be blunt on this, fighting a war with Belegar is not a great experience, because it's not that just his army is really powerful, though he is. He's got the most powerful army of all the Dwarf Legendary Lords. It's also the fact that even if you do manage to defeat the Belegar, congratulations, you've just made friends with Durfu, Gelt, and Orion at once. So expanding against Aranessa carries those issues as well. Another the best alternative, but also a problematic one in its own way, but the one I've chosen is the best thing you can do as Ikit Claw is go for Araby, wipe out Rapans, wipe out Arkan, take over all of fucking Camry, and not deal with anything at all over here. Like, just recruit a bunch of units over here, try and get to Skaven like to a higher tier, screw over Aranessa, but then get a peace treaty with her, get some money with that, let her hold Tylea or take it for yourself, but get the peace treaty with that. Maybe try and make some alliance with Scrag, but take this territory over here and expand over this entire area. Like, seriously, if Ikit Claw could just cross the ocean very quickly, that would be a much better situation in his campaign. But he can't, because he's got a lot of other things to worry about, and while Ikit Claw is certainly more powerful than Rapans and Arkan, throwing a bunch of Skaven slaves and clan rats against either of them is just a surefire way of losing your campaign very, very quickly. And also there's the Dwarven faction, and Dwarves do hate Skaven. So this is what ruins this campaign for me personally, and why I dislike playing Ikit Claw. The power is there, absolutely, but it's just like so very limited. If you're playing Ikit Claw, my strong recommendation is get the Old World mod. It doesn't have to deal with any of this crap. How would how could this be fixed? Well, surprisingly, a fix would be to have a separate faction over here that holds the Estalia province that Mogr is not at war with. You are at war with. You can take their territory. But even then, that would not necessarily be too perfect, but at least it would be better. Maybe you could get the non-aggression pack. Or maybe just move Mogr, thank you very much, because dealing with him is just an annoyance, because your armies traversing through this territory will be taking attrition from the Chaos Corruption. At least Chaos Corruption, as the Skaven, doesn't affect your public order situation. But really, Ikit Claw is in a messy situation. I mean, it's not just a question of Ikit Claw, honestly. Like, Aranessa has a problem with this situation as well. For Mogr, it's a lot better because, like, yeah, he can freaking ally Ikit Claw. That's not the problem. He can ally Ikit Claw if he so desires. The issue is, like, with the Beastmen will try and get the ritual done as quickly as possible. So, Mogr is not just raising settlements. He's raising settlements and then he's getting a ritual done as quickly as possible. So you actually genuinely need to fight him, because if you don't fight him, he's just going to do that ritual and prevent you from taking any of this territory. I mean, maybe you can pull off a trek where you don't end up fighting Mogr and you move fast enough to take Margarita and Nuja before he does the ritual of ruination here and prevents you from reselling these elements. But even then, you're still spending a lot of money to achieve any kind of success. This is the reason I like Snitch. Snitch's campaign as the Skaven is very straightforward. You start over here, you can go for the Village of the Moon, you can take Kunlan, you can take the Jadewind Mountain, you have a great campaign dynamic. Skaven do need territory, they need this kind of expansion across the province, and Ikit Claw is just screwed over because the terrain work over here in Estalia and Tylea is just really, really poor. There's a huge concentration of legendary lords. Very, very close to each other, and if you're expanding one way or another, you're gonna end up being screwed. You'll overextend yourself, and while losing a campaign as Ikit Claw is very brutal. Like you could see entire doom stacks hurling themselves against Skaven Blight and losing. While losing a campaign as Ikit Claw is a very difficult proposition, it just ends up being a miserable campaign experience. Strongly recommend the Old World. It expands the territory, makes it far larger, and makes the campaign dynamic far, far, far better for Ikit Claw to deal with. But what I would change, like at least separating to the Estalian factions, like having two different Estalian factions, or maybe Mogr starting near Bibali, that would do a fucking amazing. Like, okay, if you play Mogr, you could start over here next to Settlement, but if the AI is controlling Mogr, he just put his army near Bibali, or just not have him at all. That would be freaking great, wouldn't it? But even then, you still have the Fey Enchantress. But you can deal with that. Like, take her territory, give it to Grom, have him as a buffer state, then go deal with everything else. That could be a solution. Or maybe a higher tier Skaven Blight. Like, start having Skaven Blight start as, I don't know, tier 2 settlement, or tier 3 even, because it's supposed to be the capital of the Skaven, would be an amazing feature as well, I think. Kostin, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Stay tuned for more.